Hundreds of Beavers is so damn funny that it stole my ability to breathe amidst uncontrollable laughter. This absolute acid trip of a movie, directed by Mike Cheslick and cleverly written by Cheslick and Ryan Brixton Cole Tews, no relation, is so damn hilarious that it should be held in contempt of court. Mostly because the film's black and white cinematography and penchant for slapstick sans dialogue is reminiscent of classic silent Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton films from the 1920s and 30s, though admittedly with less death-defying stunts that would nullify a life insurance claim. Additionally, the film also features goofy Looney Tunes style antics and a video game logic that is charming to the extreme, a low $150,000 budget, after all this film is an indie, no relation, and modern sensibilities with a dark sense of humor involving death and self-worth, risque jokes that wouldn't fly in this type of movie 100 years ago, and a major level of absurdist reverence due to how the vast majority of actors in this movie wear animal costumes and play the actual animals they are dressed as, albeit with some human personality quirks. Meaning that Hundreds of Beavers, no relation, is a very bizarre movie, but also one that's f***ing amazing. However, today's episode isn't about discussing why Hundreds of Beavers is funny. After all, I'd hate to spoil any of the gags, jokes, or narrative developments within the movie, or at least any jokes and narrative developments that aren't within the footage or trailer of the movie or are necessary for me to describe in order to create an entertaining yet informative video, mostly because those who haven't seen the movie would be robbed of those said jokes and gags, which are essentially worthy arguments the filmmakers could utilize for a dissertation so that they can earn a doctorate in comedy, because truly the film's sense of humor is just that, unparalleled. Though if learning why it's funny is something that you're interested in, I do have a recommendation. Like if you want to watch a video about why Hundreds of Beavers comedic pork chops land as well as they do, I highly recommend watching a video by YouTuber Author Function titled Hundreds of Beavers is the best video game movie on the subject, because it's a pretty great and informative video. You should definitely watch it and subscribe to Author Function. They're pretty great. Link in the description. Instead, today's episode revolves around how Hundreds of Beavers' aforementioned video game logic is comparable to real-world logic. Because if anything, Hundreds of Beavers is as much inspired by video games as it is by silent-era comedies and old-school slapstick animation. In fact, the movie's numerous jokes, gags, and comedic set pieces feature elements of Mario, Zelda, RPGs, party games, and such, all to the point that they are even intrinsically part of the narrative and thematic storytelling as well. Because yes, this bonkers movie has meaning. And in order to explain why this is the case, I do admittedly need to cover some plot. You know, because it is eventually relevant to this video's thesis. See, Hundreds of Beavers follows Gene Kayak, an 1800s Applejack distiller whose occupational operation is destroyed by beavers. Hey, I blame all my problems on beavers too. Causing Kayak to become starving, desperate, and have a need to rethink over his career decisions. Which is very relatable for those of us with English degrees. So out of necessity and an eventual interest in a new trade, Kayak becomes a fur trapper, hunting rabbits, raccoons, fish, and yes, beavers, of which he eventually would then trade to a local merchant, no relation, for better gear, something Kayak desires to do because he has the goal of marrying the merchant's daughter as well, much to the merchant's disgust and chagrin. Also, there's a vagina joke in here somewhere, you know, because beavers. And from there, Kayak improves on his uncanny ability to ruthlessly murder animals, which under any other circumstance would label him a psychopath or Tyson Foods, but is instead endearingly whimsical, because there is a disconnect between associating actual cute and adorable beavers with these things. But to circle back, the uninitiated might have a question here, wondering what this story about fur trapping and a man's desire to win a woman's hand in marriage has to do with video games. And to answer, quite a lot, actually. Upon watching Hundreds of Beavers, even the most casual gamer can recall the types of gaming intricacies that this film harkens back to. There's the way in which the movie's unrealistic physics and gravity somehow work and have rules within the film's borderline nonsensical world, stealth sections where Kayak must evade enemy beavers' line of sight as if he were a solid snake, though judging by Kayak's diet and lack of cleanliness or hygiene, I imagine the snakes he creates are less solid and more liquid. There's a number counter and an old school sound effect whenever Kayak claims the life of yet another fuzzy critter, literal action sections that are de facto platformers, and finally, whenever Kayak pursues the merchant's wares, these sequences are accompanied with background music that would befit the music you'd hear when perusing a shop in a video game, a selection screen with sound effects for the product that Kayak desires to purchase, and an unrealistic realistic in-narrative economy that is nonsensical in comparison with real-world economies. Though of course I'm not counting microtransactions and loot boxes here. I said real economies that exist in the real world, gosh golly dolly parton. And look, Hundreds of Beavers features more video game components than what I just listed. In fact, nearly every facet of the movie contains a video game-ism on some level. Pun very much intended. But to detail every single instance of clear video game inspiration seen inside Hundreds of Beavers would be unnecessary, laborious, and redundant. 1, because I'd regret spoiling more than was required for this piece, 2, because there is no need to document every example, and 3, because there already is a great written article about Hundreds of Beavers video game stylistic conceits that is accessible for free on the internet, like all good things in this world thanks to our Lord and Savior, the Grimace. In fact, the article I'm referencing here was a feature for GameSpot and written by Phil Hornshaw in the May of 2024, a piece titled "A Hilarious New Movie Takes Inspiration from an Unexpected Format, Video Game Let's Plays," a piece that also acts as an interview with Hundreds of Beavers director Mike Cheslick. It's a terrific read, link in the description, if you're a Hundreds of Beavers fan, especially because through this article you can truly learn what inspired a man to transform this movie into a cinematic production. Because remember, before Hundreds of Beavers was a film, this bizarro nonsense only existed in someone's brain rent-free. However, this article also covers how Hundreds of Beavers video game attributes also contribute to its narrative progression as well, something that is very important to this video's ship of thesis. See, the film's penchant for video game adjacent mayhem is reflected in the story and Gene Kayak's character development. In fact, the second act alone features much common ground with video games and Let's Plays by design. Per Hornshaw, Gene's progress is conveyed through scene after scene of him setting traps, watching them fail, and iterating on his process with tons of jokes along the way. As Gene traps more animals, he's able to exchange the pelts for new items like a knife, a rope, and a rifle, which he then uses to improve his traps and solve problems, a sequence that evokes RPGs and Metroidvanias. Cheslick said the filmmakers intentionally designed the second act to be like watching a Let's Play video, with viewers watching twos, now to quote Cheslick, play the entire damn game. It's his Joseph Campbell hero story, from being an alcoholic who could barely survive in the snow to a man who was killing hundreds of beavers and facing the consequences for it. That journey of becoming better is not told in a truncated montage. It's not told through elliptical edits of the Rocky montage of him getting better. You actually watch Ryland play the whole video game. You watch him catch every beaver. You watch him get every item and then apply those items to the levels, basically, of his loop, end quote. And this is relevant. If anything, it means that Mr. Kayak's first attempts to be a successful fur trapper mirrors most gamers who try their hand at a new video game. Which is to say, we f***ing suck. Think about it. When playing a new video game, especially in a genre we are unfamiliar with, we are often hapless buffoons whose inexperience with a given game is both embarrassing yet kind of hilarious, because we don't know what the f*** is happening or the best stratagems to apply to our interactive experience of choice. It's just a lot of trial and error, though at the start, the trial and the error go hand in hand, kind of like how it has been over 15 years since the Chicago Bears fielded a consistently good football team. Hell, this is especially true when playing Soulsborne titles like Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and the like, which are arduously difficult, games that essentially throw the player in the deep end to figure out how to sink or swim themselves, a process that contains much of the earlier mentioned trial and error, in order for the player to hopefully, as people on the internet say, get good. And this echoes Kayak's journey as he tries to become a fur trapper. Through falling on his face, often literally, Kayak is akin to a gamer experimenting on the most optimal way to advance in a given title. He tries, fails in hilarious fashion, and then tries again, as if he were to gain entry to a Valhalla of ineptitude, all before he devises a functional strategy, doing so regardless of the numerous instances of failure. In other words, Kayak's goal is to get good. And for Kayak, just like gamers who toil away for hours within their gameplay loop, the good was eventually got. Kayak found innovative ways to apply his craft, accrued better tools through his intense labor, and invented new tricks that were more efficient at murdering lots of animals, essentially cheesing and breaking the proverbial game in a way that was beneficial to him, meaning that Kayak's approach to fur trapping and a gamer's approach to a seemingly insurmountable task in a video game are one and the same. They're thematically applicable to one another. And admittedly, I know exactly what's on your mind. Yes, the Italian beef is 110% a better sandwich than the processed cheese jizz infested Philly cheesesteak. But the other thing you may have been pondering, given the title of today's video, is how Hundreds of Beavers video game logic also reflects real-world logic. After all, Hundreds of Beavers is a hilarious movie and one silly enough to the point that, on the surface, it might lack meaning, trading in thematic purpose in favor of entertainment value. But that's not true for Hundreds of Beavers. The film is both a great watch for the sake of fun in and of itself, all while also containing strong thematic storytelling. Because unlike my phantom vagina, Hundreds of Beavers has depth. And that said depth is conveyed through Gene Kayak's work ethic and determination to hone his occupational skills, a theme that surpasses just being about how gamers tackle the monumental act of playing a video game. Hey, I'm not using the words monumental in jest here. Statistically speaking, some poor f***ers went into Elden Ring blind. But rather, Hundreds of Beavers is relatable because Gene Kayak's journey is universal. And no, I'm not being facetious here. This is a man of the people. After all, nearly everyone has tried their hand at a new job, trade, hobby, and such. And let's be honest here, at the start, most of us probably sucked at these respective endeavors, beset with more blunders than successes, all to the point that we may have rage quit these tasks and activities out of frustration. Because have you ever seen me play guitar? There's a reason for that. But with that said, there are generally occupations, trades, hobbies, and such that we stick with, even though when actively working to better our skills, we faceplant like Gene Kayak in very humorous ways. Yet, despite these missteps, we often utilize these failures as learning experiences in order to increase the odds of future success. We improve after each failed attempt, which is overall comparable to Gene Kayak embarking on a new career involving fur trapping, as he, at first, bungles even the simplest of tasks, but through practice eventually becomes a seasoned pro at his craft. If anything, Kayak made numerous mistakes, but he utilized those said mistakes as lessons in order to approach the challenges of his new occupation from a more productive angle. And that resonates with a shit ton of people. Hell, speaking for myself, I didn't begin as a decent writer or content creator, but through hard work, trial and error, and such, I honed my craft and sharpened my skills. Which, to be honest, I still am. The goal of leveling up my capacity to create great content is always a work in progress. So yeah, Hundreds of Beavers' narrative and thematic relevance extends far beyond the realm of video games. Sure, its play on interactive entertainment works as a fascinating and delightfully enjoyable romp that had me wheezing with laughter so hard that I might have needed a CPAP machine, but considering its subject matter and lead character revolves around the notion of embarking on a new career and adventure and failing a lot before he grows into his new role, Hundreds of Beavers can be narratively and thematically ubiquitous with the human experience. It can act as a comprehensive reflection of how we find our footing in a new job, trade, or hobby, and how through hard work and effort we can surmount the challenges of those said new jobs, trades, or hobbies, that we can overcome obstacles and achieve our goals even though it may seem impossible, ultimately proving that Hundreds of Beavers embodies more than just video game logic. It represents real-world logic too.